I'm just going to kind of redo that.
What, the fact that you dress like a 60-year-old black man?
I aspire to dress. The best dressed men in America are elderly black dudes. They are the best dressed men. I love visiting New York. Used to live there. Love to go to Marie's Crisis, visit my friends. But my favorite thing about going to New York is I will go on the subway and I will see like a 70-year-old black guy who looks awesome. He is in a just cut pinstripe suit and he's got like a slightly stylistically contrasting cabbie hat that fucking works. And I'll be like, hey man, I just want to say you look fantastic. And then he'll like be like, you look pretty good. And I'll be like, yes! The old black guy said I look good. Eat it, other white people on the bus.
And you win. Now we know why you dress the way you do.
Yep, I do it for the lulz and likes of older black men. That is the motivation.
Excellent.
Oh.
Here we go.
Do we want to talk about... Well, let's talk about the tickets.
Yeah.
I want to know how much of what we talked about before the show do we want to bring to the show?
I think
probably
we should
not
do that after it's confirmed.
Yes.
I don't think it's a good idea to talk about any of that stuff if it could jeopardize.
I don't know what we're talking about.
the stuff that we were just talking
me
about.
being a congressional dish employee.
Oh,
stuff.
How we're trying to go to the conventions and there was a deadline and you just whoopsie daisy didn't do it.
Didn't know there was a deadline. Didn't know it was this soon. Checked it yesterday and went, oh fuck. So like I fucked up. However, in my defense, didn't know the deadline was then. So
I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that.
I accept culpability for this.
Yeah.
As way of explanation.
Yeah.
We're still, 2.5, 3 months out? I didn't think that it would be that soon.
That a place where the president and the all of the senators would have a lead time for security.
The ex-president.
Yeah.
Hey, fair. However, Justin,
this is like John Hinckley Adams' wet dream. Right. like the target.
The only similar stuff I've done though, Justin, are with you going to New Hampshire and Iowa.
That's true.
Where I just rock up and they go
a feral.
Yeah, and they go, who are you? And I go, oh, I'm a podcaster. And they go, all right, come right in. Right. So that's been my prior experience. I've not had to fill out paperwork. And so just didn't realize it and sat down yesterday to plan the next 4 months of my life and went, oh, nuts, I messed out on this. And then, very kindly, Jen Briney, who's already been credentialed, went, well, what if we were able to get you under the umbrella of Congressional Dish, to which my face fucking lit up.
True.
I went, I would love to be a junior reporter for the Congressional Dish. First action, day one. Unionize.
Yeah.
That is the very first thing I will do is form a union for Congressional Dish employees, which, Jen, you'll probably be invited to join.
I mean, I'm a real bitch of a boss. You should know.
Yeah.
I run a tight ship.
Fucking fire him immediately.
Yeah, wait. If
this is the kind of agitator, commie bullshit that you got to snuff out at the root.
I know. He's already unionizing.
I haven't even joined yet, and I'm wanting to form a union. Yeah. If this does work, we should have a party where I get fired or I quit or something. You know how like weird couple like Gwyneth Paltrow will have like a divorce party or whatever.
Yeah.
At the conclusion of that, we could do something like that, or I could just remain on the books in case we ever have to do it again and I miss another deadline.
I mean, it makes sense.
Frankly, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Let me compliment you. We last week went out to go see The State, and then afterward, you were like, "Hey, I got a big episode. I would really appreciate it if you listened to it before I published it." I didn't. I watched wrestling instead, but I did listen to it after it was published, and I thought it was very good. I would encourage everybody to listen to Andrew Heaton's examination of the 50s as if it were a foreign country. And I have a little tidbit for you.
All right.
You were talking about computers, and specifically pulled up the first time that a computer was used to predict the
presidential election. Eisenhower versus Adlai Stevenson.
Mm-hmm. Did you know that the computer got a bad rap because it reported Adlai Stevenson had a shot?
Oh, really? I did not know that.
It did. And it was a big thing. And they blamed, like, computers. And then found out that it was user error. They had accidentally hit another zero in one of the early vote totals. And so the computer was right the entire time. As soon as they fixed it, it was predicting an Eisenhower blowout.
One of the things that I enjoyed about, so for that episode, I did a a metric fuck ton. That is the proper unit. A metric fuck ton of economic research, going through like literally just tables of Bureau of Labor Statistics. But I also went through a lot of media from that era. And the funniest thing were, of course, the wildly inappropriate sexist advertisements that are rife throughout the 1950s. But like going through that particular broadcast with Walter Cronkite and whoever was explaining the computer, the funniest thing about that I wish had kept going was both men are unironically referring to a computer as an electronic brain throughout the broadcast.
Yes.
And I'm like, why didn't that catch? That sounds like very Asimov fun kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating look into all that. And
if I can further pitch a little bit for listeners in terms of what you would...
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Before you stray further from the sexist and misogynistic advertising, I think it's worse than that. It's not just misogynistic. It was just an open psyop against women's insecurities.
Yes,
For sure.
Every
Every ad is just like, not only does your coffee suck, and they make a point to be like, your coffee's terrible, Marie.
Yeah.
The hot young 18-year-old secretary's coffee is better than yours.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh no.
This is one of the weirdest things I found research. Like I found weird shit looking for 1950. Like one of the things that didn't make it into the episode, partly because it was from 1937, and I still don't fucking understand what was happening, is there is a PSA video called How to Undress for Your Husband. It is the weirdest thing in the world. It's from 1937. The opening narration is perv shot following a woman into a room. And it like the opening narration goes, 30 years ago when journalists still had standards, you couldn't just follow a woman into a room like this. And you're like, well, then why did you do it? Like, why did you? And then it's them like going like,
when journalism still had standards.
Yeah.
When we were openly inflaming the Spanish-American War through propaganda.
This is 1937. They're already saying the golden age of journalism. That's the kickoff. And then they go like, women should, lure their husbands and make them feel good when they're in the bedroom, but they have to do it in a sensuous way. Look how this woman's removing her shift, just like she's taking her clothes off every day. And you're like, she has. Like all women that I know get undressed on a daily basis at some point. And then you're watching it and you're like, one, is this porn? Is this like weird 1930s porn? Two, if not, who the fuck went, you know what we really need to teach women how to do? Properly remove their clothing in a way that's almost a stripper, but not. For their husbands. There's a lot of shit like that.
Government
I'm sitting here like, I want to know what they tell me to do.
Yeah.
What am I doing
And
wrong?
they go back and forth between like the 25-year-old hottie that they're perving on, but also like a 50-year-old matriarchal looking lady who knows how to do it properly.
Really?
It's this like again, it's a very, I don't know what they were up to. I want to know.
I would imagine the 25-year-old also looks 40 because she's been doing nothing but huffing asbestos and drinking lead her entire life.
It's very like, I would love to be in the pitch meeting for that video. But yeah, the rest of them are weird. Like the coffee one specifically, I just kept stumbling onto this where one of the fun ads that I bring up in there is, this is an advertisement for cold cream. And they talk, cold cream's necessary to remove makeup from your face because, you work hard, all that standards garbage, right? Then... but how do we know that our cold cream works the best? Well, we used a Geiger counter and put a little bit of radioactive material in it. I'm not making this up.
No,
They
it's
put
in there.
radioactive
It's in
material
there.
in a cold cream, and you hear this clicking noise. That's a Geiger counter.
Yeah.
That they're using. They're like, see, like the radioactive elements didn't come off of this cold cream, but our cold cream did get the radioactive elements out. Use our cold cream because and you're like, how did that? Like that's there. And then the coffee thing specifically.
No. The kicker of that ad is. The woman says, and please listen to the episode to get the exact phrasing, but something along the lines of, well, now I'll finally get hit on by my boss.
Oh, yeah, that's the detergent. Or that's the deodorant.
The deodorant.
The deodorant one is a sensuous secretary sitting at a typewriter clacking, and in between the clacking, she looks at the camera, and the dialogue's all like this. I did what you told me. I bought deodorant. I put the deodorant on like you asked.
Oh, there
it's
we
this
go, yeah.
weirdly breathy, I am in your thrall, and then explaining how she's more fresh and things, and then shrugs and goes, and yet my boss still won't take me out to dinner. And I'm like, so the goal of deodorant's to get your boss to hit on you? That's the goal?
That was, it becomes very clear that in the 50s, especially marketing to women who exclusively did the shopping, at least compared to today, it is that buy our products or your husband will fuck his
Yes,
secretary.
that seems to be the takeaway.
You do not buy, or if you are a secretary, buy our products so you can fuck this housewife's man.
Because as a working woman in the 50s, your goal, of course, is to nab the boss and quit
Yes.
working. Like that is not how the actual, because I go into the statistics here. 1 out of 3 women in the 50s were working. 1 out of 3 workers in the 50s were women. This is after the period where women have come into the workforce.
Yeah.
We're already kicked off, right? But all the men that are working in advertising, and I use that word very specific, they're men. All of them are still locked in like a 1920s worldview of like
everything revolves around their dick. Like you should fly because you might fuck the stewardess.
Yeah.
Like your wife should get you the right coffee, or else you're gonna fuck your secretary.
Women are my favorite kind of pet, and they're tolerated because they excrete children through a front hole. Like it's a very like just very very male view.
That sounds woke now.
The coffee ads. I stumbled onto this. I think I had to cut it down. We had 7 solid minutes of just the exact same ad in various forms because they're all plagiarizing each other.
Yeah.
It is, would you like more coffee, honey? The guy going from 0 to 10 immediately. Your coffee's awful, Janet. Like we need to get divorced level, and then angry. Like I'm a closet gay, and this is how I express my rage. And then her going to a grocery store where a man in a white lab coat will explain why Instant Folgers is good because it's mountain grown coffee, which I would go, isn't all, like, there's not a lot of swamp coffee to my knowledge. It's like there's not a lot of Nebraskan coffee, but they do that, and then they'd come back, and then she'd go, what about the coffee now? And he'd be like, the coffee's sweet as you. But like they're comedically intense and angry, and it's the anyway. The thing I was going to say, to make everybody feel good listening right now, going back to the ENIAC statement of the first computer, the first commercially available computer, and so on and so forth. I crunched the numbers on how a smartphone that we all carry around stacks up to a computer in 1950. And basically, if you're listening to this show on an iPhone or something comparable, mine is 3 generations back, and that's what I was using as the data point on this. If you're using a 5-year-old iPhone like me, your iPhone is the equivalent of if somebody in the 1950s wanted to build a supercomputer, that supercomputer would require the entire income of everyone in Canada. The whole nation of Canada's resources would go to putting a supercomputer that rivals what you carry around in your pocket, although their supercomputer would be larger than the Pentagon and use as much electricity as a small-sized city. So everybody listening, good news, you were literally carrying around in your pocket the equivalent of a $10 billion supercomputer in the 1950s, or what to them would have been $114 billion. So,
are you ready for some breaking news?
Yeah.
Just got an email from our credential woman. She says, maybe.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
We've got a maybe.
We'll take a maybe.
We've got a maybe.
All right.
All right.
Whew. Okay. I'm going to live on the edge of my seat for a while now. Well, fans will keep you updated.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, you're going to have to with that shit coffee you keep making. From Austin, Texas, I'm Justin Robert Young.
I'm Andrew Heaton.
I'm Jennifer Briney.
And we're not wrong. On this edition of the program, we're going to talk about the TikTok bill that, as we speak, is sitting on the metaphorical desk of Joe Biden, awaiting his literal signature, and whether or not it's going to survive an almost certain legal challenge, as well as whether or not social media is changing the way that doctors treat the claims of women's pain. All that in your emails. But before we get any further, for DC listeners, and guys, I'm going to say move fast.
Yeah.
If you want tickets to our live show, go on Eventbrite, search for it. It is May 24th at the Anacostia Arts Center in Washington, D.C. Show starts at 7. You can show up at 6. It's going to go till 9. We put it up for our patrons yesterday, and as I speak to you, we are nearly halfway sold out just from putting it out to patrons. So, if you want tickets, this is a today, not tomorrow situation. we will do our best to accommodate as many as we can. I don't know exactly what our wiggle room is on capacity, but based on the first 24-hour window of sales, this is not a drill. This is not showmanship. Buy them now if you want.
Usually when people say this kind of thing, they're lying to you. We're not. This is an instance where I looked at the numbers and went, fuck, we should have gone for a bigger venue, like just based on the opening salvo.
But
we're new at this. We don't know. So, I mean,
Yeah.
thank you to everyone who already bought tickets. You're giving us the confidence we need to keep doing these live shows. But yeah, DC, they're going real fast. So don't
turns
sit on
out
it.
DC likes politics.
Yeah, who'd have thought?
Who would have thought?
Turns out. Speaking of DC, the TikTok bill recently passed by the House and Senate could mandate the sale of TikTok from its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, and potentially ban the app if a sale doesn't occur within a year. This legislation is unprecedented in its direct targeting of a single company, which could provoke significant legal challenges regarding its enforcement and constitutional validity. Experts like Will Reinhart from the American Enterprise Institute have found no historical parallel for such specific legislative attack on a global firm. The bill will not only puts into question the future of TikTok, but also the broader implications for executive power, international trade, and free speech, with potential First Amendment issues to be contested in court. The broader context reveals a sudden shift in U.S. policy toward international data flows and internet governance, moving away from a previous stance of globally interconnected digital trade. This shift reflects increasing concerns over national security and foreign influence, particularly from China, amidst a complex trade relationship. We've talked about this in terms of what we thought of the bill initially. If you're confused, yes, this is the same bill that already passed the House, but
It has one change in it.
it has one change, and that is that it bumps the time frame from when it becomes law to when they would be forced to divest.
And the president has like an extra one-time 30-day extension or 60-day
90-day
extension.
extension.
90-day extension.
If
It
we
pushes it past the election,
There we
basically.
go. There we go. That's it.
Wow.
That's the
I didn't
reason
even
why.
think about that.
Yeah.
Spoiler
That's
alert.
what they're doing. They're giving Biden the ability to punt it if he gets in trouble for it.
Yes, because by the way,
Can I explain this real quick, like the
Sure, yeah.
difference? So in the original bill, ByteDance would have had 180 days, which is 6 months to divest, and that's when the effects would happen. Which, if you look at when this is being passed, it's mid-April, so that would mean that it would run out in mid-November, right after the election. So what it is now is that ByteDance will have 270 days. That's 9 months, and Biden can extend that for 90 more days. So it basically buys them a year and gets us to next spring when the actual
That's great. So
disappearance
all
of
these
TikTok would
all
happen.
these Gen Zers that are calling their members of Congress to ask why Congress is banning it, Biden can come out and go, "Hey, man, I insert explanation of how he's not the problem and he's doing his best to keep
Well,
except
this
for the
is a
fact that
Republican written bill, so I'm not sure this is specifically for
this is for the
Biden.
Republicans, okay.
It's for
no,
all
but
of them to
but
kick it
he's
past
signing
the
it.
election.
I mean, like
No, it is,
yeah,
but this change, we don't know how it happened. This was written by Mike Gallagher, who has since resigned, but it is a Republican written bill, so I don't know
Touche.
exactly
Good point.
how the date change happened. But the timing does mean that
did
we're
not
not.
happen without Democratic control,
For
considering
sure.
that Senator Cantwell in the Senate was the stopgap, and then she was like, "No, we can't do this. We need broader social media reform." Blah 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 blah. And then immediately, very quietly last week, just sort of said, "Oh no, I'm for the House bill." Oh, what changed? 6 months.
The dates.
That's it. So that was the whatever Democratic stuff at the Senate was a total smoke show. There was not a real a principled opposition to it. They just needed it to pass in a different way and in a different form. That's exactly what's happened. And
Yeah, we
meanwhile-
can't hold them accountable for this vote, especially in the Senate, because it was a package of 15 bills that this got included in.
Right.
So if you want to know how your senators voted on this particular bill, you can't because
Well,
of the way they did it.
Because
we
we're
could-
in the oh shit omnibus phase of the legislative cycle, right? Where
Well, this isn't, so an omnibus is government funding, but it's the same idea
Yes.
where they took Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, bunch of sanctions on Iran, the Repo Act, which no one is talking about and should be, where we take Russia's assets in the financial system and just steal them and give them to Ukraine. That is now law, and the TikTok ban was in there, although it's bigger than TikTok. I'm sure we'll get into that. But all of that, 15 bills were packaged into one. And that's why you can't hold them accountable for any one thing. Like, oh, you funded Israel. Well, I did it for Ukraine.
I have.
Oh,
Yes.
you banned TikTok. Well, I did it for Ukraine. Like there's...
Or Taipei.
Or Taipei, or sanctioning Iran.
So if I'm
the
the Republican congressman from Toad Diddle, Texas, I can go, look, I didn't want to fund Ukraine. I think it's a proxy war, but we do have to stand by our allies in Israel.
Yes.
And I thought it was worth it. And conversely, somebody that's up in Lick Eyeball, Michigan, can go, look, I also think we need to get out of Israel, but we do have to fund Ukraine. Like they can all play whatever they need now.
So that's true in the Senate, 100%. However, in the House, this bill did pass on its own. And the only difference, like I went yesterday and looked at every word because it's only 16 pages. So I compared the two. The dates are the only changes. And so you can hold your member of the House accountable for the TikTok situation because a almost identical bill passed on its own. But over in the Senate, it was only package deals. There's no way to...
even the TikTok bill was part of a potpourri. There were 4 bills, Ukraine, Israel, Taipei, and then et cetera.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of shit stapled together, and they all passed in different configurations. Then they were repackaged together, thrown up to the Senate. That's what passed yesterday, and now Joe Biden is assuredly going to sign it. There is no question of whether or not that's going to happen.
All of this happening in the course of 1 week.
Can you all help me understand why this is more pragmatic from the legislative perspective? And what I mean by that is, I would think normally if all 3 of us were members of Congress, Jen and I don't see eye to eye on all economics, but I'd say most other things we do. So if we were going to have like a big compendium bill, we might get into loggerheads. But if we broke it down, we could go, well, we're going to vote on all these 3 bills. We're going to vote in the same way, but we're going to have different things on this 4th bill. So I would think it would be advantageous to split them. That way you can get it very granular and get more people to build consensus around them. But it looks like the legislative mechanism goes the exact opposite way. Is it just providing cover? Is it like... Is providing cover more meritorious for members of Congress than getting legislation passed? And that's why this happens?
That is my assumption.
Okay.
But then
cover.
there's also, so like there are some people in the Democratic Party that are desperate to get money to Ukraine that really don't want to give any more money to Israel. So by packaging them together, you would have to say no to Ukraine. In order to stop the bill, these people would be saying no to Ukraine because they want to say no to Israel. So packaging them, it's kind of like, okay, which one do you care about more? Like, are you going to abandon the Ukrainians just because you don't want to send more weapons to Israel, knowing damn well that there's plenty of ways that Biden can keep doing it? Like, there are legislative reasons why you do this to force the hand of someone who disagrees with you on some of the other things. So it goes both ways. But I do think the lack of accountability is a part of this. I think that the Senate in particular, getting to take this vote on so many things at once, it really shields them from accountability for all of it because there is an excuse for whatever thing they get a call from the constituent. Like, well, I know that there's issues with banning TikTok, but we had to help Ukraine. We had to help, like, whatever it is, there's another thing in this bill that they can point to and be like, this is a thing we had to do. So we just had to do the bad thing in order to get the good. I think that is it's a strategy.
There's some other stuff here that I want to get to, including the presidential election ramifications. But son of a judge, Andrew Heaton, do you think that this will stand up to legal scrutiny?
No.
Goodbye, folks.
Goodbye. Obviously it's more complicated than that. I think it's going to have an uphill battle, and I'll tell you why. Some of the stuff that I'm reading in the news, I think is not really going to come up. Like in the article that you just quoted, Justin, they brought up the kind of specificity and the lack of precedent in specifying a company like that. From a judicial perspective, that doesn't hold water for me so far as I know. The relevant issue there would be with a bill of attainder, which is prohibited by the Constitution. Bills of attainder are where you are using the legislature to punish a person or entity. That is forbidden by constitutional law. What you can do is you can make a law that affects somebody moving forward, but you cannot punish somebody using the legislature for something they previously did. That's an action of the courts. It doesn't, like, the legislature has no recourse to meter out punishments to an individual. But they can make a law that affects individuals, and they can make a law that affects a very tight level of individuals moving forward. The fact that the TikTok ban is not actually just we're going to ban TikTok, but rather the wording of it is, any social media company, and correct me if I'm getting the
Foreign
broad strokes wrong,
adversary.
that's owned by a foreign adversary. So it only affects TikTok, but it is sort of a legislative precedent that would affect other things moving forward. I don't think that would be struck down based on Bill of Attainder law and the Constitution. The bit that I see very likely as being the uphill battle for that bill if it hit the courts would be under First Amendment grounds. First Amendment grounds are very robust in the United States. We have the most robust freedom of speech laws in the world. And I think that's part of the reason that you see so many court cases now trying to figure out how to glom onto freedom of speech as opposed to things that might make more immediate sense. But in this case, I think it's relevant. There are, 170 million TikTok users. So from a free speech perspective, you're violating, or you're committing something called prior restraint. So if this were a situation where, let's say Congress went, we're not banning TikTok, but we are going to ban specific topics on TikTok that we believe are being perpetrated by the CCP or something like that, you're not engaging in prior restraint because you're not preemptively stopping everybody from talking. But this would engage in prior restraint. The effect would be almost certainly that TikTok would just go under, it would no longer exist, meaning that 170 million Americans would no longer have the ability to express their opinion on that platform or listen to each other. So it's a prior constraint issue. It's just preemptively shutting down all that speech. The reason that that's relevant and why I think that would make a difficult time in the court system is if you're getting into territory of prior restraint, which this is, you would go into the realm of strict scrutiny review with courts. So the way it works with legislation brought to courts is there's rational basis, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. And when you're violating constitutional rights, it automatically becomes strict scrutiny. So if you're talking about things that involve freedom of speech or Second Amendment rights or anything that's protected in terms of identity by the Constitution, that's something that's considered so legislative and judicially sacred that it has to have strict scrutiny review. Whereas, like, let's say theoretically, I sue the city of Austin because the city of Austin is... they passed a law about how parking lots, all the parking lots have to face east-west in Austin for some reason. And I go, that's going to really irritate my business. I'm going to sue the city of Austin and say that they're violating my rights. That would probably just be rational basis. That is to say, because the rights that are being infringed on in question are not constitutional rights like freedom of speech, Second Amendment, et cetera, it's just I own some stuff. And it's not targeting me because of my race or my gender or my religion or my sexuality or anything like that. A court would very likely look at that law and go, it might be dumb, it might be stupid, it might be ill-founded, but regulating parking is something that a government could rationally engage in, so it's just rational basis. The only threshold you have to meet to get into this level of scrutiny is, could a government conceivably have a reason to do that? As opposed to like if the government wanted to paint everything pink or something. So you don't have as much. When you get into strict scrutiny, where you're dealing with constitutional rights, strict scrutiny is a two-pronged test where it has to be a immediate and clear threat to national security or something very, very important to the functioning of governance, and the legislation has to be narrowly tailored to agree or to deal with it. So it needs to be very specific and as minimally restrictive as possible, and it has to deal with something that is prima facie important and immediate. I'm not sure that the legislation as written would hit either of those prongs in a strict scrutiny test of the courts if challenged on First Amendment grounds. In terms of the immediacy of it, everything I've read is one of two things. Either China could subtly juice the algorithm to nudge people towards a particular policy outcome that they desire, or two, they could hypothetically do something in the future, and we want to limit that power. Neither of those strike me as something that is an immediate, clear, present danger to national security. They're both hypotheticals, and they're both subtle things. So I don't know that either one of those would hit that prong. Let's say that they do. We then move on to the narrowly tailored, minimally restrictive idea. So again, with strict scrutiny, if we're going to say abrogate free speech rights for I don't know, colonels in the army or something, the courts would look at the legislation and go, well, you've said like colonels in the army just can't ever talk ever. That's so broad, it's not going to work. You should have said they can't talk about national defense issues at a bar out loud, something like that. Like you need to tailor it, right? I think you can make a very good case that this legislation could have been more narrowly tailored, that you could have gone the route of trying to have a comprehensive law that treats social media platforms as utilities. I don't know a whole lot about that kind of economic history nor that legislation, but I've read a little bit of stuff on there that might have been a more narrowly tailored way to do it. Alternately, just like a lot of the stuff I'm reading about TikTok is the privacy violations. Okay, well, you definitely could have written more narrowly tailored legislation on privacy violations.
That ain't gonna happen because there's a lot of apps that have pushy privacy stuff.
Right. So
but they are American based.
Sure. Either way,
and yes, I know that TikTok is technically an American company, but they get their marching orders.
Well,
from
like
Beijing.
they're too like Montana did ban or tried to ban TikTok, right?
They out and out banned it.
They out and out banned it and immediately got overturned by a district court in Montana.
Well, so that's why what you're saying makes sense, but for this particular bill, it was cleverly written. So that's why, like, when I'm hearing these free speech arguments, the way that they wrote this, it doesn't ban or even target TikTok. It doesn't. What it targets is Apple and Google and Oracle. In that, what it says is that these partially foreign-owned apps and websites, because also this is bigger than, just an app. This can be applied much more broadly, which is, one of the things that people are saying it won't stand up to scrutiny is it's targeting this single company. It's not. This can be applied to apps and websites and augmented reality, whatever they, define that as. But the way that it's structured, it's saying that these companies don't have a right to be in the App Store. These companies don't have a right to internet hosting. It's not saying they don't have a right to exist. It's just that you can exist. You just can't do it in the App Store, or if you are in the App Store, then Apple will be fined out of existence.
Should they not divest? Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
those are the mechanisms by which they would enforce a ban.
But
that is what you're describing.
But that is how this bill is trying to get around the free speech thing, because it actually doesn't target TikTok itself. It just says, like, you can exist. Like, we're not telling you what you can and cannot say, what people can and cannot post. It's just you can't be in the App Store if Google and Apple want to exist, and you can't get internet hosting if Oracle wants to exist. So it's targeting these American tech companies. Like, they're the actual targets, and telling them what they are allowed to host. And in that regard, I hate this bill. I'm not arguing for it, but I am thinking that it's written to get around those First Amendment
I'm sure,
issues.
and it's much smarter than the Montana bill was. The Montana bill was a lot clumsier.
It was straight ban, and Trump tried to ban it too. Remember, he had that executive order, and that didn't work.
The Montana bill, the Montana bill literally had a typo in the title. Like, it put a hyphen in TikTok. Like, that's the level of intelligence the Montana bill had. And it initially was just going to be the ban TikTok bill, and then Governor Giaforte stepped in and went, let's not call it that. Let's call it the Foreign Adversaries of Montana and the United States bill, for kind of similar reasons. That one, unfortunately, that one doesn't really work for our purposes, because the reason the court squelched that was they basically went, Montana, you can't preempt foreign policy. There is already existing federal legislation dealing with foreign-owned threats to national security via media, and your state cannot preempt that because it would be doing its own foreign policy in effect. And so, basically, on federal versus state procedural grounds, that one got thrown out. To my knowledge, it had nothing to do with free speech. So there aren't any precedents there. I think I agree with you, Jen, in terms of they're not specifically saying TikTok, but I don't think that's the relevant issue anyway. That would be more of a bill of attainder.
It is named, but it's not
but the
the
legislation
only target.
is not. Yeah, the legislation doesn't.
It's much broader than that.
Yes.
Which I think would,
in terms of the ban mechanism,
right?
They are defining the ban mechanism, and so the free speech question, especially when it comes to the internet, would be, yes, the First Amendment exists on the dark web. The dark web, your free speech is protected on the dark web. You do not have free speech in the realm of these private companies that we can put the screws to. And that's ultimately what I think the biggest differentiator here is that at the end of the day, the United States government they know where the headquarters are for Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon, and they can send people with shiny shoes there to have conversations with them about whatever they want. They don't have control over the TikTok algorithm. That is controlled by ByteDance in Beijing. It's the same algorithm that they use for Douyin for mainland China. And I think that's why it is being targeted.
I am curious if Apple and Google are going to get in this game because, again, they are the actual targets of the penalties in this bill.
Oh, no.
And I'm wondering if the First Amendment, if they got involved, like I don't know what they're planning to do, but since they're the targets, this really is telling them what they are and aren't allowed to offer. I'm wondering if they would have incentives to challenge this because, like I said, this is beyond TikTok. This is beyond... So it's like if they are now being told by whatever president is in charge, which could be Trump soon enough, that like, oh, you need to take down this app, and this app, or else we're going to fine you out of existence. I'm wondering if their First Amendment rights would be violated by this.
This is where I can take off my political hat and put on my tech pundit hat. That's part of the reason why this has been so weird, is that normally when anything like this comes to attack any kind of industry, but the tech industry specifically, the tech industry usually binds together and says, but we will all fight this as one. That has not happened here. The tech industry has largely said, geez, these commies, huh? We should really do something about them. Get them the hell out of here. And largely, I think that's because nobody really particularly feels any allegiance to ByteDance. A lot of these companies have already felt burnt by the Chinese Communist Party that has restricted their ability to do business in mainland China.
Yeah, didn't they just ban Meta?
They've banned pretty much, unless
China banning stuff over there.
Yes.
They've banned everything.
And so they're like
anything not directly controlled by the Communist
you.
Party's banned over there.
We're not going to get competed with when you won't let us compete with your companies out there. So fuck them. Let them get chucked out of America. They don't care. They would rather the government say you can't have it in here, because they would probably prefer to just remove it from the listings themselves.
I also, and we're rapidly getting out of any level that I feel I've got competency in describing jurisprudence here. But when you start getting to like their free speech rights, we get into the territory of, are Apple and Google private companies? Are they platforms? Are they utilities? Mm-hmm. And my guess is, well, I don't even know what would be the ideal. My guess is they have a very clear view of what they want to be, and they're not going to buck whatever that is. So if they don't want to be a utility right now, they're not going to want to become a utility. So I'm not sure how that would work.
They don't. And the I think it's the Federal Trade Commission that's bringing charges against Apple.
Right.
Their entire argument hinges on whether iOS is an ecosystem or just a program that runs your iPhone. If it's a program that runs your iPhone, then they don't really have a charge of monopoly. If they can prove that it is a ecosystem that Apple has undue influence on, despite the fact that they made it and they installed it on their phones, then they are able to do what they are alleging. Then it is a monopoly by the way that they have described it. So a lot of this is being figured out now. These companies went from cool things that made business go faster to the dominant players in culture, media, and business. And we are figuring out legally how do we apply our own rules to them.
A lot of the conversation right now is going back 100 years to like the 1927 Radio Communications Act and the 1934 American Communications Act. I'm missaying the name of those bills, but basically the acts, originally, as I understand it, those acts were put together just to figure out, like, how do we keep radio stations from not accidentally using the same frequencies and creating a fuck cluster. And as they were putting that together, they went, by the way, World War I is happening or just happened, so we need to have some provision in here that requires all American radio stations the board of directors be American or something to that effect. I don't know all the details on this, but they're kind of going back to that right now, looking at that legislation going, well, look, there's already, and that's true, there's already lots of legislation like that. Like the First Bank of the United States had provisions in it that you couldn't have the director be a foreigner. The Jones Act is this kind of stupid bullshit, which I won't even get into, but there are plenty of,
One of the greatest hits. Mm-hmm. the heat heads, the hair just stood up on the back.
Which, by the way, some of the angriest vitriol I've received for videos is from pro Jones Act shipbuilders.
Yeah,
there's definitely a merchant marine shipbuilding action committee that hates me.
Well, they like having the rules rigged in their favor. So,
Weirdly,
you know.
they certainly do. They certainly do. So they're going back to that. I don't even know how relevant.
There used to be a time where you could mandate women to make good coffee.
Yeah.
Or else you were allowed to fuck your secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even make coffee, so Joe can fuck anyone he wants.
Yeah. That's the law. That's law.
No, you hit the loophole. You can't do anything.
Yeah, you can't do anything.
No.
You're gonna. I think you're gonna see a lot of people going through that older legislation. Although that being said, a lot of that legislation happened before the intervening 100 years of very solid, robust freedom of speech law. So to go back to your earlier point, Jen, of the legislation is not technically banning TikTok, nor is it technically banning these things. I think the courts would be able to say, yes, but the automatic effect of this is you're banning it. In the same way that we discussed this previously, that if TikTok is ordered to be divested in the United States, the functional result will be that TikTok dies, not that TikTok will be purchased by Elon Musk or something like that. I think that the courts probably could look at that. I could be wrong on that. It could be that like a Clarence Thomas type character would go, look, it doesn't matter to me what the effect is. My job is only to read the letter of the law, and you pass the letter of the law. That could be the case.
I mean, that is the one thing that usually we see with the Supreme Court is that it's like, well, it was passed through legislation. Like a lot of stuff that's been slapped down recently have been executive orders because the Supreme Court leans on the idea of, no, you need to all get together and pass something in the manner in which that legislation happens. And this happened. It passed the House twice.
This to get into weird judicial territory, like a lot of the time, the fights you see on the Supreme Court are how much deference do we want to give to the executive branch, and how aware of the letter of the law versus the implication of the law do we want to be. So Clarence Thomas is the most hyper-literalist member of the Supreme Court, to the point where if you were to, at this point, bring up, like, why can't Maryland have its own state church? The Constitution prohibits Congress from establishing a religion. Clarence Thomas would probably read that and go, look, the Constitution literally says Congress can't do it. It doesn't say anything about the states. I have no problem with it. Whereas everybody else in the court, other than Clarence Thomas, would go, okay, come on. The implication, right? And typically the progressive jurists tend to be more on the implication side. The conservative jurists tend to be more of the literalists. So you would think in that instance then that the progressives would be the ones that are going, look, the implication of this is banning free speech. The functional outcome is banning free speech. Therefore, ... And the conservatives might be literalists. That said, I think the conservatives on the court, the current court, are pretty good on free speech. So I could also see them swinging in and going like, nope, this is a free speech issue. We do not want to have the executive branch getting an up or down, thumbs up, thumbs down on the ability to cancel the platform of 170 million Americans. So I think that there'll be a lot of friction in the court case. I don't know. I don't think it's an open and closed thing, but I think that there are a lot of moguls that could hit it and knock it over before it even gets to the Supreme Court.
Because it is a big expansion of power in the executive branch. Because like it's not that the company has to be foreign owned. It's a combination of people that own the company. If it's more than 20%, then they're eligible for this type of, not a ban. That's a big expansion of power that's going to affect a lot of different, or could affect a lot of apps.
Yes.
And it could, but this is a big expansion of power that is just ripe for abuse. So it's like the fact that even that article from Politico that you sent us, like they're talking about this as if it's directed at TikTok. I'm seeing it as so broad that
you and the
I'm
ACLU
wondering,
both are very worried about the implications of this.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if the courts will take that into account too, that the way that this is such an expansion of power to make things not exist on the internet in the United States anymore. I think it's something we should all be really concerned about. And I look forward to the TikTok backlash by Generation Z, because they are not going to be quiet about this.
I'm fucking thrilled about that, by the way. Like, hey, Gen Z listeners, remember when Uncle Sam fucked your shit up because it turns out that the government's a lot of power and you should just fear accumulations of power? I'm glad you're learning that early with the thing I don't care about.
Can we get to the political ramifications of this?
Yes, please.
Because it's fascinating. You have two candidates that are going to be your nominees in Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Both old, who don't know what TikTok is other than the CCP.
But one of them has a TikTok account for his campaign.
Isn't it Biden?
Yes, he's the one who wants to ban it. The other one does not have a TikTok account,
But doesn't
and
want to ban
has
it.
offered or has initially started the idea of banning it, and came out 2 days ago and said, young voters, rise up. Joe Biden is taking TikTok away from you. I am the skibbity toilet Gen Z defender, Donald Gyat Trump. Like,
Just
the
forget
Rizzler.
the fact that I tried to ban it first.
Pop and
That
lock
never
Trump.
But even then,
happened.
he's like, well, so if you wanted to get specific, you could say, well, I started the process that created the modern system that TikTok is happy with, that the data is all run on Texas servers. I brokered that deal. That was a good deal. That's where we were going to leave it. But Joe Biden, he's not the Rizzler, folks. He doesn't have Riz.
Although, as Jen pointed out
wrong.
earlier, it was a Republican House that authored that legislation. So does he just conveniently forget that?
Doy.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like we are in the like whose line is it anyway? The rules don't matter like point of this.
Right.
Like whenever anybody's on PX3, I'll talk about what's effective and what's not. Someone would be like, yeah, except it's a lie, and it's like, come on, it's the first day. Come on, like let's pick it up. Like nothing really matters. Like Donald Trump came out and said, I am not for a federal ban. Does that stop Joe Biden from running every abortion ad saying Donald Trump will ban abortion on day one? He's wanted to do it
good point.
forever. No, of course not. And Donald Trump doesn't really
Donald
care
Trump
about
will
Joe
come out and
Biden's
say, like,
positions. He's
listen,
going to say
I
whatever
paid
he
for
wants.
18 abortions with women I had affairs with. I am the most I have paid for 3 employees of Planned Parenthood to put their kids through college, killing babies.
Yeah.
So don't worry about me.
I got my card on file.
Yeah, I get a free coffee the next time I knock up a porn star.
Wow.
By the way, I think something that you could see happen, not super likely, but this is exactly what I would be doing if I'm ByteDance right now. I don't remember the relevant legislation, but the reason that Rupert Murdoch is an American citizen, in part, if we want to be cynical, is that Fox News and News Corp would have been subject to different legislation and different strictures because when he was an Australian citizen, he was a foreigner. So that at least expedited his decision to become an American because we are the greatest country in the world and he wanted to be an American always, et cetera, et cetera. But that was a legal mechanism that he did, is he became an American citizen, and I think he probably renounced any claims of Australian citizenship.
Yes.
So if I were ByteDance right now, what I would be doing is having the board of directors slim down to 15% Chinese, and those remaining 5% I would have be Chinese nationals that are already in America, get their American citizenship, renounce their Chinese legislation, and then their Chinese citizenship, and go, okay, we did it.
That's the other problem about this, and I think that we have illustrated a lot of principled issues with this legislation and its far-reaching capabilities. ByteDance is not allowed to sell their algorithm, even if they wanted it. It's been put on a list of state technology that is not allowed to be sold unless the CCP agrees to it. And then part of the reason why this went the way that it went, at least according to some of the Hill reporting, is that the Chinese embassy started lobbying for TikTok, which I think did the exact opposite of what the embassy wanted to do, because they were, proving more of a link between these two entities than TikTok wants to make clear, as they have said during their congressional hearings. So
I'm wondering, I mean, putting on my tech dummy dum dum hat.
Yeah.
Is it possible that TikTok would sell it off and then just switch out the algorithm to a shitty one that isn't the one that's operating DVN? Is that an option?
On PX3 on Friday, we have Tom Merritt on, and we talk through some of the scenarios. The weirdest thing about it is, from both of our perspectives, none of them seem likely. Every version of this going forward, except it gets stuck in the court and eventually, just gets struck down, is weird. Like, it would require something very odd, like China becoming more lenient in something like this being sold in any capacity. ByteDance reversing their current course to say that they would sell it in any capacity. There being a buyer for it, which right now would be a challenge. It would probably, Tom suggested, Microsoft was interested the last time, but Microsoft also, that was before they found AI as like their lead thing for the next several years. So it's like, now the most likely scenario
Yahoo?
that
Wouldn't that be
I think we can buy Yahoo based on our Patreon. The biggest likely buyer would essentially be the foreign owned people who own it now. That maybe there's a scenario where a Susquehanna Capital and some of the other American-based Silicon Valley funders can put together the money to basically hand themselves TikTok, but they get some kind of license where they can operate the algorithm from ByteDance. But even then, the question would be, can they actually change the algorithm? And that's something where it's like, right now, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, Congress, the executive branch, they can go to Palo Alto, they can go to Mountain View, and they can say, show me what's happening, show me why it's happening, and they can be shown that. They can't do that with TikTok. Like, yes, the algorithms run out of Texas, but the company that runs it does not know what's in it. And that's become a problem. Like, part of the known data leaks between this walled off data center in Texas and Beijing have been the walled off data center saying, hey, we're trying to implement the stuff that we need to, that you told us to implement for the algorithm, but it's not working. And so they'll share elements of things that they're not supposed to do just because they're blindly trying to update this algorithm as TikTok's headquarters, which they're run by a Singaporean CEO. It's technically Santa Monica as their headquarters, but people assume, I assume, the actual decisions get made in Beijing, where ByteDance is headquartered.
Can we go back a little bit? You did a good job a moment ago, Justin, of articulating the weirdness of the bedfellows and sides in this conflict insofar as the presidential election goes. But what are the actual ramifications for voters? And I ask this because it's my understanding that Gen Z is the biggest user of TikTok, and that they are calling members of Congress, and that historically the youngest eligible voters are the least likely to vote in the country.
Yes.
So if I were Biden or I were Trump, I would be looking at, like,
I think Trump is looking at that.
Well, from where I'm at is Andrew Heaton. By the way, Gen Z, remember that time that the government fucked up your senior prom, and then the government fucked up your sophomore year of college? That year you should have been getting drunk, getting laid. The government fucked that up for the rest of your life. Be bitter for the rest of your life because the government did. So I see long-term implications here, but they're not going to vote that much if they're like every other generation. No. So are they actually going to have an effect? Will this affect anything?
Unless they show up to vote. That is an option.
They won't.
We'll see.
Spoiler.
We'll see.
Spoiler. Source.
Gen Z.
History.
Prove these fuckers wrong.
Source every election ever.
I'm just hoping that this percolates in them until they become bitter and angry like me in their 40s.
This is a generation that has gotten more fucked than others. I mean, it's so hard financially.
More fucked than being sent to war in Vietnam?
Look at all the wars we're starting now. At some point, we're probably going to have boots on the ground. They're probably afraid of that.
And even then, they won't vote because they didn't vote in the same numbers when they were being sent to war in Vietnam.
But they didn't have their favorite app being threatened by the Biden administration. I'm just saying that it's a fear. Like, this is a group that historically, hasn't voted, but they have the option, and it would be a massive number of people that could change
what are
things
the fault
if they
lines?
did.
Who do they vote against?
Oh, against Biden, because like you said,
so you think
he signed us in the law.
It is a liability for Biden.
I guess.
Well, look, the person that has figured this out is Donald Trump. You just said it. He's the one saying, like,
Rizzler.
Yeah, he's a fucking liar, but Gen Z hasn't been paying much attention. And during the Trump years, it was an executive order. It got shot down. Like, he can lie about this. Our political memories when we're not paying attention is nothing. But now that there's an actual in-law threat signed by Joe Biden, this generation is pissed about this, and they're going to be talking to each other about it on TikTok. And maybe, between that and Gaza and not being able to afford houses and the student loans and all the things, maybe this generation will decide to vote. And if they do, I think Biden's in fucking trouble. I think that this is bad news for him.
Yeah, I think on the whole, I agree with you. I don't think it's good news. I think that part of the coalition that he would have to put together is, although Gen Z or young voters, regardless of generation, don't vote at the same level, they do vote overwhelmingly Democratic. We are talking about very slim margins that have decided the last two elections. So every vote does count. It's a reason why, Dearborn, Michigan is important to Joe Biden. There's a reason why a lot of the decisions that are being made is because he's got a fragile coalition. But who knows? I mean, who knows whether or not this will even be an issue by the time that November rolls around? It could just be stuck in court, or it could be shot down by then.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe everybody will forget about
this
it.
would not be my
I
top.
think they're going to forget about this.
I think this is fascinating from the broader long-term implications that are going to result from legislating companies like this and the free speech violations and so forth. I think it's a fascinating issue, but I'd put it below my top 5 of things that are going to affect the presidential election. I
Yes.
think
I would
I
agree with
don't
that.
think we're accounting for how many people are addicted and love TikTok and run their businesses on TikTok. I follow this lady who does information about Las Vegas. I friggin' love her. But most of her business is on TikTok, and she was at the Capitol yesterday physically lobbying. And this is not someone who's generally political. That lady that does Politics Girl, like she does most of her business on TikTok. There's a lot of people who are content creators, who are influencers on TikTok. So I think their voices are going to be louder on this issue than others. And I think we might be surprised at how big this issue could be in this election.
A
lot of people care.
It's going to not matter.
Okay.
Solved it. Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong is where you need to go to support this show. On this week, we will be talking about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Waste of time or an orgy of access between establishment wings of everything district. We will discuss every inch of that. And by the way, again, patreon.com/We're Not Wrong. The patrons got their tickets. If you find yourself listening to this, going to Eventbrite, trying to get into our DC show, and it's sold out, I mean, the patrons got it. The patrons got it a full day before, and it is good to be a supporter of this show. We thank everybody who does it. We thank everybody who listens as well, but mostly you, the supporters. Let's talk about doctors and women. According to Axios this week, in medicine, there's a growing recognition of the need to address historically overlooked issues specific to women's pain. Social media has amplified women's voices, leading to a systemic shift in how their pain is perceived and treated. Neil Shah, CMO of Maven, notes an increase in discussions around the topic, particularly concerning women of color. Recently, the American Society of Anesthesiologists released new guidelines aimed at eliminating pain during C-sections, a response to studies showing that 15% of women experience pain during the procedure. The guidelines advocate for a more nuanced approach to pain assessment and patient involvement in treatment decisions, moving away from a traditional 10-point scale. The increased awareness is also evident in routine care, as highlighted by numerous personal stories shared online. Jenny Wu, an OBGYN resident at Duke University, observed that many women on platforms like TikTok discuss the severe pain and side effects associated with IUD insertions. These online discussions are reshaping medical practices, encouraging more specific communication about pain. The issue gained further attention with a podcast revealing instances of inadequate pain management during egg retrievals at a prestigious medical center, highlighting how systemic this problem may be. The renewed focus on women's pain aligns with broader efforts underscored by President Biden's proposal to invest $12 billion in women's health research to achieve greater gender equality in healthcare. Jen, have you experienced doctors not taking your pain seriously? And if not, why do women complain so much?
Asshole. Was this whole setup just for that joke?
No, but I did tell it to Ashley just to make sure I was allowed to tell it on the show.
Yeah, you got a good belly laugh out of Joe when I told him that you were going to say that. Okay, so me personally, I have been, knock on all the wood, extremely lucky in that I really haven't had a lot of health issues. Most of my pain has been self-inflicted, stuff like hurting my ankles and my fingers and all the things that you use while playing volleyball.
Cancer.
Yeah, but that wasn't painful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
That's scary. It's scary, but not painful.
Yeah, it was mentally scary, but all they're doing is hacking moles off of me. So it's like, it's fine.
I'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
Next time that happens, come over. I'll do it.
there was literally one
2
where
for
I'm
1,
like, I feel like I
$50.
could just scrape this off myself. Like, do I have to fly all the way to San Francisco? Yeah, so that wasn't physically painful. However, I am one of these people that has been informed mainly through social media in the differences in how women's healthcare is covered and especially studied, which is why, I mean, it's a proposal from Joe Biden to invest the $12 billion. It hasn't actually been done. But so many of our studies, even on general things, have been done exclusively on men. And I think there is a lack of awareness of how women's cycles affect everything about us. There's certain times in the month that we feel more pain, certain times that we feel less. There's certain times that we're straight mental and certain times that we feel very confident. I wasn't aware of this for a very, very long time. I'm going to say I was like deep into my 30s before I became aware of all of this. And it was 100% by social media. My doctors have never once talked to me about those differences. And, you know, there's going to be times where you're going to feel just like mentally sad and down. And that's going to be, you know, the third week of your cycle. You're just not going to feel as good.
I, for one, am scared shitless to discuss that in the open. Like that.
Well,
that strikes me as the exact kind of thing I shouldn't be talking about or looking into.
And I am curious if men as doctors are afraid to even get into that, because there is this fear of, like, you know, men say, oh, are you on your period?
We literally
you
joked about that a month ago
Yeah.
on this program of how inappropriate it would be had I said, Jen, are you on your period?
Yeah, it's a fearful thing, but it's so connected to how we feel on a day-to-day basis, and it's not taken into account in a lot of these studies. And I have heard the IUD thing. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I haven't done it, but it was something I was looking into. And the general, you know, research, or not research, but the things that you're told is like, yeah, you insert it and it's fine, and it's like 90-something% effective, and it doesn't hurt to put in. And then I hear horror stories from people that I actually know.
It is.
The doctors don't tell you this.
It is. I know a friend of mine, a close friend, that just had hers out, and it is a horror story. Like she had to get surgery to have it removed.
One of my friends here in Austin went into literal shock. Like, she started having seizures when an IUD was implanted, a coil of some kind was implanted in her. She went into literal shock. She had a husband she had a fiance and a roommate at that time. And the husband didn't get the phone call, so the roommate showed up. The doctors thought they were a throuple and believed that they were very progressive in calling it was a whole shit show. But yeah, main point. Like, she was told the same thing. Of like, no, it's fine. You'll just take some aspirin. And then, like, I started having seizures.
There is just a lot of lying to women. Like, because I've heard a lot of the same thing with like the egg storage, where women will get their eggs frozen, and it's like paid for by their companies, because it's like, hey, keep your prime working
Keep
years.
working.
Girl boss your way to the top.
Exactly. And then it's sold as this, like, oh, it's totally fine. Yeah, you freeze your young eggs. Don't worry, you get them reimplanted. And it's like, you see now that we're going through a generation of that being very normalized, and now women are getting to the point where they're like, awesome, C-suite, time for a golden stroller. And it's like, oh, no, sorry, this is a lot less effective than we sold it to you. You based major life decisions on a pitch that was very confident that had no right to be.
We're like, this is probably about 10 years old now, but it's not that old. It's fairly recently that they changed the rules where, like, if you're getting gynecological surgery, doctors are not allowed to, they're not allowed to show your vagina and or insert things into it to doctors who are studying. Like, this is well within my lifetime. As an adult post-college lifetime, like, there were practices in hospitals where if women were under, it was just acceptable practice to, like, they're going to be out for a half hour. We're going to bring in orderlies that are learning medicine. And so, like, yeah, you can kind of feel around and understand what's happening in this process.
Just fiddle around in there.
Yes, because when they're asleep, it doesn't matter. And this is just all for research. And this is to teach people how gynecology works and so on and so forth. And at some point, somebody went, these are really good things, but we should probably ask women's permission.
Just get a sign off.
Just be like,
Yeah.
are you okay with doctors, like, coming in and looking at your vagina for reasons that are unrelated to this particular procedure for research purposes and so on and so forth? Probably a lot would go, yes, I'm fine with that. Probably a lot would go, no, I would really rather it just be limited to my doctor and
But based
procedures.
on the lack of understand, like, if I was asked that question, I would probably say, like, yeah, go for it, because there has, in my experience, just been a lack of information that's come to me from my doctors. I've learned so much from doctors who are online. So, like, I was on the birth control pill for a while, and it was because I had really, really bad cramps. And in that respect, I was believed when I said, like, these are bad and they're debilitating and they're making it hard for me to study, work, like, do anything. And so they put me on the pill, but they didn't tell me that it makes you insane. They didn't tell me that It gives you higher risks of having blood clots. I mean, there was a lot of side effects, but the going insane was a big part of it that I wasn't aware of until I went off of it. It was just basically like, oh yeah, take the pill, your cramps will be better. The end. And if you didn't read the little insert with the teeny tiny text, like I wouldn't have known these things. And now as I'm getting older,
5 out of 6 women might go crazy.
I went crazy. I was crazy in college. And until
Please see our ad in Teen Vogue magazine.
Yeah, the people that hate me on this show, you think I'm crazy now? You should have seen me from about 2000 to 2008.
Now she's only crazy once a month, but back when she was on the pill,
it was all the time.
Fucking would have been good content. We could have made a mint.
Oh, man. The crying. So much crying for no reason whatsoever. But now there's a whole thing that I am just now learning about called perimenopause, which is the 10 years before you actually have menopause, where you, again, go crazy and you have symptoms, but you're not actually going through menopause. And I'm learning about this from a woman on Instagram. She's a gynecologist who's just like, why is it that women will go in to the doctor in between the ages of 35 and 45 with symptoms of perimenopause and not even be told that it's a thing that's happening? And I have had plenty of doctors. No one has mentioned to me that I should be watching out for this. No gynecologists, no doctors, nothing. So I'm having to do so much of my own research about women's specific health that I do think that we have a big hole here, and that $12 billion is much needed.
Can I ask real quick, because I could totally be wrong on this. But when I read the phrase proposal to invest $12 billion in women health research to achieve gender equity in healthcare, that I would love to know how it's going to achieve that end.
Me too.
Because that sounds to me like a very Biden thing to do, is to go, well, these people were part of our coalition. They're good people. We'll give them some of the money now that we're in power. So I would want to know how that is actually going to result in the needed research we're talking about.
I would too, but we do need just like women specific research, because you can be talking about anything. You can be talking about heart disease, for instance. And if you're only doing those studies on men, then you're not taking into the account that some of these women have been on birth control for 20 years. You're not taking into account that our cycles change, so many different things about us. So does it change how efficiently our heart beats? Does it change? Like, there's so little studying on the effects on women specifically that I just want to see $12 billion going to studying women specifically.
Let me rephrase what I just said. I would like for money and research to go to those exact purposes that you mentioned. I think that you bring up a great point in terms of the salutary knowledge that would be gained. I just want to make sure that that is in fact going to that, and it's not just a random grab bag code words. Various administrators are going to suck it up in the administration.
I would love $12 billion spent on the faster that we can move away from these weird shaman people that we have controlled through our Byzantine healthcare system being in charge of all of our health, and move toward robot doctors and AI answers that would be there 24/7.
What are you talking about?
The doctors, I cannot wait until the entire medical industry is disrupted by AI. I want doctors to be people that perform exams and then enter data into a machine that I can talk to 24/7, and I don't have to worry about when they're open. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're in my network. I don't have to worry about all of these things. I want my primary physician to be a robot as fast as possible.
I would like for...
And for parts of reasons like this, where you have uncomfortable conversations. You have conversations that tend to shift depending on where we are in our culture, that either women are not taken seriously because they're thought of as just bad coffee making machines, or that we move into a more post-feminist age where now you don't want to engage with, oh, maybe you're kind of acting crazy because of your cycle. Am I right? Like, you don't want to do either of those things. I can understand why humans are affected by that, because we are creatures that want to remain within the mean of our herd. But when you're dealing with shit like health, and sometimes a hard truth needs to be said because it can literally save your life, then yeah, I just want a talking textbook. I want something that I can ask the same question 50 million times and it can either tell me the same thing, or if I give it the right thing that just happened right now that has experience, I can immediately interact with this talking textbook, as opposed to maybe writing it down or remembering it, or being in a situation where the doctor comes in and now I got to remember everything that's happened since the last time that I was at the doctor. And he obviously is in a hurry and he doesn't want to be there and he's thinking about his tea time. There's a lot of human interactions that I don't think give us the best medical care, and stuff like this is another example of it.
As long as you have plenty of women training the algorithm, because right now with the lack of information, the lack of studies that we've done on so much, like I think you're still going to have the same problems, whether it's human doctors or robot doctors, if you don't have the information and how women's bodies respond to everything specifically, then it's the same issue.
But take perimenopause, for example. That's an understood phenomenon. It's just one that doctors don't talk to women about. Except for this lady on Instagram, apparently.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm curious.
I had no idea that it was coming, and I'm
Genevieve,
already 42.
With doctors that you've had that are related to women's health specifically, when you're talking about your reproductive cycle, or you're talking about menopause or perimenopause, et cetera.
Don't talk about that with my doctors.
Okay, let me.
That's the problem.
The doctors who ought to have informed you of this, were they male or female in your experience?
Female.
Okay, and I'm curious as to.
And one of my doctors I absolutely loved, and she was all about, like, anytime something happened, she would pull out her textbook that had a bunch of sticky notes and stuff in it. I really liked her, but it just wasn't a topic of conversation. There wasn't. Part of the problem is that there's a lack of education. And in the way our healthcare system is set up, where the doctors get paid on, churn and burn 15 minutes, you can't really teach me about what's going on and get really into, like, what is the system? Why am I getting headaches? Is it because my eyes, which it actually turned out being? Is it because I'm going through perimenopause? Is it because I'm not getting enough water? Like, you have to sit with a patient and really figure out what's going on with their life to figure out what's happening. And when I was having those dizzy spells, I was going from doctor to doctor to doctor. None of them talked to me for more than 15 minutes. They were just sending me off to someone else. So I think it is also a symptom of our shitty healthcare system that pays these people based on number of visits as opposed to actually figuring out what the problem is. Because something as simple as chronic headaches could be related to our cycle, which you're not going to know if all the studies on headaches have been done on men. So it's a multifaceted issue, but I do think a lot of it comes down to our healthcare system is trash.
Well, I don't disagree with you on that.
reformed.
Although I'll note that, like, my last two doctors have been awesome in that regard. My doctor here in Austin, we've had this conversation. I use One Medical, so I pay like a $200
Yeah, I have
premium
them
every
too.
year. Do you use One Medical here in Austin? Do we have the same doctor? Shout out to Robert Dehaney, great guy.
Damn.
Love
I
Dr.
want your
shout out.
doctor because I'm now on my third one. They keep moving.
You know what? I love him. My friend Kimmery uses him. You should totally use our doctor, Robert
Okay.
Dehaney. We'll chat about our visit. He's a great guy. I love him, and he'll listen to the show. He'll before. But I've talked to him specifically about that because he blocks off like a 30-minute period to sit with you and talk to you when I do my annual checkup, and he's great. Like, I'll come in and I'll give him like spreadsheets I've made where I'll be like, so here I've been keeping track of my blood pressure. I've been keeping track of my heart rate. I'm free testosterone particles versus regular testosterone. Do we need to worry about that? I've been thinking about using those sweat pills that were originally designed for incontinence but might mitigate sweat and humidity. And he's gung ho. He's like, cool, man, like that. Yeah, we could try that out. It would interfere with this medication, but he's very. I feel like I've got a partner in my medicine when I'm talking to him. And he likes it, and I've talked to him about that because I've had very shitty doctors like that. I had a doctor like that in New York that every human being was just a fleshy widget on a conveyor belt that they were trying to get in and out as soon as fucking possible so they could go golf with our money. But when I talked to him, he didn't become a doctor to do that. He actually likes being a doctor. And so he likes being in an environment where he has set periods of time rather than just a rush model. And then randomly, when I was in Tulsa, I went to a family practice where the doctor was a guy, his daughter was the administrator, and his grandson was the nurse. Great dude. He was 92. Every time I went in, it took an hour and a half because he would sit down and give me grandfatherly advice and then talk to me about when he used to be a doctor in prison. Then he would cry a little bit, and then give me more advice, and then we'd move on. It was great.
But that's why I signed up for One Medical, is because one of the things they advertise is that you'll have more time with the doctors. And so I did get a blood test. I went in there. They spent more time talking to me about it. I just need to develop a relationship with a doctor. So the fact that my doctors kept leaving is like, okay, I kind of gave up.
He
but
literally keeps notes on me where he's like, how's comedy going? I'm sure he's in a file somewhere,
Yeah.
but he's a great dude. And the
The
other
problem
benefit
with
is
One
for you traveling as much as you do, One Medical is really good.
well, so that was another reason, because they had offices all over the place.
Yeah.
So no matter where I go, they would have my medical records. It was one of the main catalysts for me signing up for that. But I don't know if you know that One Medical has been purchased by Amazon. And so now if you have Amazon Prime, it's going to be something like $7 a month. It's going to be Prime Ramified. So I don't know if it's going to stay that good once the masses get in there. I don't know if it's going to be a churn and burn again, because now they have, 6 times the number of patients that they have when it was just this one
Or
smart idea.
alternately,
We'll see.
The market has identified a problem in the system and is catering to that. So maybe just more people will shift over to that.
Robots.
Can I ask just a quick question before I forget? This is related to the beginning of the conversation we had, where taking women's pain seriously specifically. I have heard reports, or I've read articles about how doctors are dismissive of the pain claims of women, and in particular African American women,
Especially Black women. Yeah.
So I've heard that, and that sounds like just like latent sexism and racism that we should be rooting out of the system. The bit that I honestly don't know why this would be of issue is it says the guidelines advocate for a more nuanced approach to pain assessment and pain involvement in treatment decisions, moving away from the traditional 10-point pain scale. That, to me, because it is a subjective person-to-person scale, seems like a reasonable diagnostic of how, in your experience, 10 being the worst pain you've been in, 0 being in, like it's not precise because it's going to vary from person to person. Is that why we're getting rid of it?
I don't. Jen, you speak first.
I mean, I think part of it comes from your question, which I know is a joke, but like, why do women complain so much? I think there is this thing in women, I know that I have it, where I'm not supposed to be a complainer. I think because we go through pain every month, that I think would take most people. Like, if you guys for 3 days in a row were bleeding out of your asses and had stomach cramps.
I bleed out of my ass all the time. I have a horrible diet.
I do think that if that happened, like, you'd probably take a couple days off of work. But we're expected to just go right through it. Like, we just go through life in pain. And so I think going with the same scale that men do, like, I don't think it's a correct way to do that, because we have to deal with pain so
like the
often.
male scale is different than the female scale, so conflating the two is not useful.
I mean, when you say that you're feeling no pain today, you're probably feeling no pain today. When I say I'm feeling no pain today, God, I wish I could just be on morphine all the time. That'd be fun. But there are certain days where I'll be like, yeah, I'm feeling fine, but I'm not. Like, my stomach is actively hurting. I'm on medicine because I'm in pain, but I have to go through it because that's just like how it is. So my pain scale, I can say that I'm at a 0. Well, it's like, well, no, I'm not actually at a 0. I'm actually feeling pain today, but this is just a normal pain. So I think just saying like a scale of 1 to 10, I think it's probably best to get more details out of women, because we are expected to go, like, work through our pain. We are expected to keep going, and it's been like this since we were children. So yeah, I think with that expectation, I feel like unless something's really, really hurting, I don't seek attention for it. Like, I'm used to just moving through it and not complaining about it. Yeah, it's like, and because we are kind of considered complainers by some, I think a lot of us will downplay how much pain we're in, and that's why I think that scale could be problematic in a medical setting.
Well, and I suppose it's not specific because people have different pain thresholds.
Exactly.
Well, this is the only story that I have on this, is that by far the most frustrating situation I ever had with the medical community was when my back was fucked up, and that is a context dependent thing. If anybody who has been through back problems, they will tell you it is insanely frustrating, because doesn't matter where you go to. I had great doctors in Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, where they're based. We had like the best people in California were at my disposal, and the dude seemed like a nice enough guy. I'm like, why am I fucked up? Why do I have a bulging disc? Yeah, I don't know.
I had
it's better to rehab it. And then every week he would ask me what my pain scale was. And I'm like, as opposed to before I had a bulging disc, like, it's hell. It's existential hell. I can't roll over. I can't sleep on my back. Like, every moment that I move and breathe, I am in pain that I didn't know was possible. It has changed the way I think. It has made me an angry person. It made me more of a drunk. Like, it was fucking terrible. So it's like 1 to 10.
10,
all right,
asshole.
dude. Yeah. Well, it's like, and that's the only way that they know how to deal with it. So it's like, I don't know whether or not I did not come out of that saying, thank God I had a scale so I could slowly have things go down from, 1 to 10. Because ultimately, the only thing that really worked throughout that entire process, which I do believe was brought on by stress, was me walking in pain. The more I walked, the more my body got used to it, the more, and I had an epidural shot.
I had chronic pain issues
But
for a little.
it went away? It's just
Eventually.
walking and...
Eventually, so I had the shot, and that relaxed it. It was its own psychological torture because it made the pain fully go away for like 24 hours and then slowly started to return. But the hope is that my body was clenching to a point where
creating a negative pain feedback loop where
Exactly.
you're locking up your muscles, the muscle relaxes and allows your body time to heal.
And so it came back, but was not as bad as it was at its worst. And then at that point, I would, and the actual geography of this, I would walk from where we lived in Adams Point. I would walk down to the lake. I would take many puffs off a weed vape, and then amble my shambling ass down to the Tribune building, and I would sit at the bar and drink and do emails. But the fact that I could do it, that I could walk, was my reward. Like I could
Probably
smoke
what, a
weed
mile and a
beforehand.
half?
Yeah, I could smoke weed beforehand. I could drink at the end as long as I gutted out walking, and it was fucking excruciating. But the more I did it, the more my body got used to it, and it made me really, really resent my initial doctor, who told me, because I was a daily runner, told me, hey, no more running, no more lifting weights.
Oh, shit. That's
Yeah.
not the advice.
And look, she was a good general physician. And look, for some stuff like that, and that was before it was as bad, and I went through a bunch more stress after that we don't need to get into. But it was like, it first came with numbness in my leg, and she's like, oh, it's a back thing. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. So she's like, yeah, don't run, don't work out. And so I didn't.
She didn't tell you to do any flexibility exercises? Just like sit there, do nothing?
It'll get better.
Oh my God.
And spoiler alert, it didn't.
I had chronic pain issues for a little over a decade. I don't think that they were as bad as yours, but they did last over 10 years, during which time I drank a lot more than I should have, and had some really disturbing thoughts that I won't go into. And I couldn't sit. I had to get a standing desk. But by the way, News Corp that I was working at wouldn't get me a standing desk, so I just stole boxes of paper from Bill fucking O'Reilly and built my own desk. I was able to work, but it wasn't a lot of fun. But I went to, like at least 15 doctors. And I'd say one of them actually knew what was happening. And it took a really long time. The people that were really helpful were the physical therapy nurses.
Oh, yeah.
Those were the ones that actually knew their shit in my experience, because they were actually listening to people, and they were doing it over a 30, 40-minute period, and they could compare notes. And they'd go, who you really ought to go to is this doctor I know that's had, like, it sounds like you have this thing the other people I know have, but man, it sucks. Anybody going through chronic pain, it is exhausting. Like the low level fatigue you carry around all the time is just like, like I would get home from work and the pain would mount throughout the day, because it was, for me, like negative feedback from muscle retention. So I would do 2 shots of scotch and then jog, and that was that way I could I could get into a headspace that was different. It wasn't fun. I'm very fortunately, I've been pain free for 5 years, thank God. But it was.
It sounds
not
like
fun.
doctors in general don't really have an idea what to do about pain. And then you have OxyContin show up, and it's just like, well, this makes the pain go away. So let's just get everyone in the country hooked on this shit.
That was the other fucking problem, is that I had my problem right after that was a major scandal. So I couldn't even get pills.
Good.
They would not give me pills.
I'm glad they didn't.
Fuck them.
I don't want you hooked on
I had
that.
100%. I had committed to
it.
You fentanyl junkie in waiting.
I know.
I had been I'm gonna I'm gonna go down that hole. Like I was completely committed to yep. Like if that does it, I'll do it. If it ruins my life, I don't give a fuck. I'll become a conservative talk show radio host like Rush Limbaugh. And and it didn't work. It made me itchy, but it didn't have any palliative effect. So. I was fine with if it makes the pain stop, great. Didn't care about what the outcome was.
I was
it didn't work.
actively annoyed that they would not give me pills. I was like, cut me up a quarter of one. And then of course we're in the Bay Area, so I went to go see. I was so depressed. I went to go see.
If only you could have found some
psychologist.
sort of morphine-related drug on the street in the
I
Bay
know.
Area.
This is before that really took off. This is a few years before the fentanyl became all the hot shit. But I saw a psychologist through Kaiser, and he's like, "So how are you feeling?" I'm like, "Depressed, dude. I feel really depressed. Like I get high a lot and I drink a lot." And he's like, "Well, you know that alcohol is a depressant." And I'm like, "Yeah, dipshit. I'm aware. I'm aware that alcohol's a depressant, but it's literally the only thing that makes my back feel better." He's like, "But you said you got high." And I'm like, "Yeah, it makes me more aware of the pain in my back." He's like, "Even with edibles?" "Yes, with edibles. With
Oh, yeah.
edibles, it makes me very, very, very aware of where the pain is. It brings me no relief." And he's like, "Well, you know, weed's it's probably better for you now than alcohol." I'm like, "Why are you like pushing? Are you trying to sell me like an ounce of weed?" Like, he was just very, very down on drinking. Which, look, probably sure. I'm not saying that the doctor should have been like, "Oh yeah, we'll head down to the bar, have a few." But at the same time, it's like, well, this is what I'm managing my pain with, because
Yeah.
I can't have pills. You guys will not give me pills.
You fuckers won't give me fentanyl.
Yeah, because you all fucking gave away too many pills. I missed the pill parade where everybody got pills. Dickheads.
I think.
I still think you're better off.
No, I am. Now that I'm on the other side of it, I agree with you. I'm glad that I didn't have to, go through some Brett Favre Night of the Long Shadows. But like, it would be, I don't know. In the moment, I was like, especially since what worked was a fucking targeted injection to my
Yeah.
back, which relaxed my back, which made things better. So maybe in the very early on, if I got a short script of pills, it would have relaxed my back and I wouldn't have gone through the situation that I had if I had used it appropriately. But unfortunately, we had a medical scandal where too many people were getting too many pills. And so they're like, absolutely not. Anything involving pain, we will not give pain pills.
When you're in pain, you just want it to go away. Yeah. That's all. And you'll do anything.
Yeah.
I get it.
Anyway. All right. Anything else on this?
Nah.
No.
Let's get into the emails. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com with a single vote majority. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com. A nice man writes, "Hey, what's the baby registry again?" Well, thank you, dear viewer or listener. It is at babijurymore.com. That's where you can go and get our registry. It's been well traveled. Thank you to everybody. Listeners to We're Not Wrong who have sent extraordinarily nice emails, who have bought stuff off the registry. Jen and Heaton walked in to see the gigantic wall of gifts that have been sent in over the last week. Greatly appreciated. And one new thing you can find at babijurymore.com, that is the podcast that I have been recording with my wife since we decided to go off birth control last July. It is season 2 of Jurymore. That was the podcast that we did when we were leading up to getting married. Now it is about the birth of our first child. 6 episodes up now, including 5 that were recorded before we told anybody. So these were secret recordings, all while we were in stealth mode. Go ahead and download that.
I just subscribed.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
Jurymore.
And keep buying him those baby gifts so that Andrew and I don't have to buy you anything.
Oh my God, you guys!
Oh,
my
I'm gonna,
family.
I'm gonna get you shit, but it's gonna be stuff I want your kid to have, not stuff you want your kid to have.
So
Patriots gear.
yeah. this
Star
is,
Trek figurines and books by Milton Friedman.
This is like all of my wise friends and family are like, "Oh, we're gonna get something. We just want to make sure we see where the tide already washes up, and then we're gonna get away with the $20 jumper and say, everybody bought everything else." Smart people.
Smart
Yeah.
people.
Smart people. Cool down period instead of term limits writes, "What if the House and Senate were limited to 6 years? 3 years in the House, 3 consecutive terms in the House, 1 in the Senate. The representative/senator can run again, but only after sitting out for 6 years. There could be a cap on the number of times that you could do that before you were ineligible to run again."
I like something like this, and certain states have provisions.
This happens for governors.
Yeah.
a lot.
So
Yeah.
I am friendly with Governor George Nye, 92 years young, living in Oklahoma City, former governor and lieutenant governor of Oklahoma, and responsible for the state song of Oklahoma being Oklahoma. And I saw him recently. We had margaritas a few months ago. And he's an example of that, where you can, in Oklahoma, you can run for 2 consecutive terms as governor. You're not limited to how many times you can be governor, but you're limited to 2 consecutive terms at a time. So you can run for governor twice, sit out, and come back. I like something like that. I think the idea of kind of just breaking up the kind of inertia that a politician has over being able to dominate that position is something useful, but allowing them to come back again. Some of the other things we've talked about on the program are a listener a couple of years ago emailed me, and I'm still smitten with this idea that the longer you're in office, the higher threshold of votes you have to get. So, like, if you've been in office 3 terms, you have to get 70% of the electorate to vote for you, and if you don't, there's now a runoff. Like they redo the election and you can't run or something like that. But I would love for there to be some mechanisms that make it difficult for people to just sit in one job for 50 years.
Jen?
I just want limits. I don't care what they are. Pelosi, McConnell, Schumer, Leahy, Grassley, Cardin. I want them out. I want them out. They've been there my entire life. I just want them out. I don't care what we do to make it happen.
I very much like the idea of the House and Senate being a 2-way street instead of a 1-way street. Because very rarely does a senator become a representative, but very often representatives will become senators. They're like the feeder pool to go up to, the rarefied air of the Senate.
Yeah.
But I think, like, for Pelosi, if we can't get them fully out of D.C., then Pelosi having to say or most likely saying at some point, well, shit, all right, like, I'll take my 6 years as the senator from California. She almost assuredly would have done it if Feinstein were capped or would have had to move. She would have been on that list. Then at the very least, you don't just have permanent power structures that exist for decades.
Well, I'm missing. What would the mechanism be? You can't go from the House to the Senate?
So right now, nobody is a senator and says, you know where I want to go?
I would love
the
to
House.
go back to the truck stop.
Exactly.
Leave
right?
the country club.
Everybody from the truck stop is like, boy, would it be nice to not deal with these mouth breathers and head to the Senate.
Where I really belong.
But what if you could only stay in the Senate for so long, but you did want to stay in D.C.? You would probably have to go win your district in the House. You'd have a good shot at doing it. You'd probably win. But if you wanted to stay in D.C., you wanted to stay in the mix, then essentially a senator coming back to the House would be somebody that would have a lot of sway, but now would not be part of a permanent power structure in the Senate in the way that we have right now with, Mitch McConnell and the 3 Johns that have been there forever. And now we're going to see one of the Johns ascend to the Iron Throne. But congratulations, we'll still have 2 Johns and Mitch McConnell, who will be a part of that coterie until he leaves anyway. Yeah. And then if you had more of that, I think it would be, it would probably make the House a little bit wiser, which I think right now it probably needs on some level, but it would at least take out the permanent power structures of the House, which, look.
The Senate has it too, though. I checked.
Exactly.
Schumer's been in there since 1980.
Yeah.
We weren't even born.
But you're saying if you capped Senate terms, it would force the Senate blockade to break up, and they might go down into the House and break up the House blockade.
Because either they would want to go become governor of their home state, or they would want to stay in D.C. and be
move along.
Yeah, and be in Congress and still be able to be a part of things.
Or the other thing you do, like, I think, again, I'm most familiar with Oklahoma's laws. I think Oklahoma has a provision of you can be in the state house in either chamber combined for 10 years or something like that. Like, I
like that.
I like something like that where, you can be a congressman for 3 terms and then you can do part of a Senate term. Or the other thing, I don't think anybody's playing around with this, but I like the idea as a constituent. I like the idea that you're not allowed to run for a new office while you're holding office.
Me
and that's
too.
because if you're representing me as a congressman, I want you to do your job. I don't want you to run for governor. I don't want you to run for Senate. You know what? Sit out a term, like decline to run for office again. Like I'm not going to run for office, and then go run for that thing. Great, maybe I'll vote for you. But this thing where people are, I'm in the House and I show up once a month because I'm running for Senate, and I'm just using that as a jumping point. Like I would be fine with legislation that would stop you from being able to run multiple campaigns at once.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Spirit Animal Shame writes, "It's with a heavy heart that I write you to inform you of your serious cultural appropriation committed during your most recent episode. Spirit animals, far from the totemic tradition, are typically not animals that represent you or are naturally similar to. but instead are messengers or spirits that lend their own nature to you in times of need or stress. I encourage you to learn more rather than representing the teen magazine spirit animal quiz definition on your program.
You know, this whole cultural appropriation thing, maybe that's how you use the term spirit animals. That's not how I use it, obviously, because when I asked my friends here which is their spirit animals, they all understood exactly how I meant it. In my white girl culture, I use that term in that, what animal do you think represents your spirit the best? So that's how your culture uses it. Fine. But I do not feel the need that I need to go and educate myself about your culture because I use those words.
This was lighthearted. This was more lighthearted than that.
Well, I mean, it says serious cultural appropriation committed.
I cut these emails down, so I wouldn't blowtorch them totally. But the way I read it was a little bit more light.
I don't feel impugned by this email. Honestly, I just want to do ayahuasca. I think of the three of us, I'm probably the most likely to live in a commune and probably the most likely to go on a spirit journey using peyote or ayahuasca. Is that fair
I'll
to
go
say?
With you.
Really? Because I would love to do it.
I think you're 3 for 3 on that one.
I read this one. It was great. That will be our teen. Instead of a ropes course this year, we will do an ayahuasca trip.
Really, the only difference is that I would probably be the only one who would still want to work. Like
I know.
I would like to do ayahuasca, but I would also like to continue working.
Yeah. No, but like truly though, I say that not to denigrate this. Like this, I'm like, this is fascinating. I would love to know what my actual spirit animal is in that context.
Well, I guess the point is that
I'm
it's not a horoscope thing, or it's not like a who do you see yourself as. In
the way he uses the term, I'm allowed to use it differently.
Yes. I probably should have put more wink, wink, nudge, nudge in this than I did in terms of writing it down. But the way that I read it is that it's just one of those things that in the term spirit animal as it is understood through Native American lore, a spirit animal is somebody that
it's like a spirit guide or something like that.
Yeah, it's more like a George from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah. Okay. Not George, but
the other
Clarence.
Clarence.
Yeah. Well, honey, this magical hobo down by the river.
Exactly. Yeah.
Told me what life would be like if I hadn't been born.
So George's spirit animal is a hobo down by the river.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that he sees himself as a hobo down by the river. It means that in his moment of need, spiritual guidance came in the form of a hobo down by the river.
I do want to.
Which is fine, but just I'm not it's not this particular paragraph. Like
you're saying in general, this cultural appropriation.
Yeah, like I used those two words together. You guys understood how I meant it. Had I phrased it like, what animal do you think represents your spirit best? We might not have gotten feedback like this at all. I put my hair in braids and I'm cultural appropriating. I have a recipe for hummus and I'm cultural appropriating. Yeah. Like at a certain point, stop it.
Yeah, no, I think you're broadly right. Like I think that there is a nugget of truth to the idea of cultural appropriation, and that if we're talking about there is something that is sacred to my culture, which is being used in a frivolous, offensive, or corporate exploitative way. Like if theoretically, and it varies from tribe to tribe, but in certain tribes, headdresses are sacred. So like if Coca-Cola wanted to have a Coca-Cola can with a headdress on it, that I can understand why somebody in the Muskogee tribe, I don't know, the Osawapaha, would say, hey, that is a specific religious iconographic emblem that's important to us. But I very much agree with you when we take that concept where I'm like, okay, there's something to that, or like taking it outside of the religious context, but nonetheless sacred, like making Martin Luther King Jr. like the thumbs up emblem of your burrito commercial. And you're going like, hey, there's actually a lot of like spiritual connotation to that. Where I completely agree with you, Jen, is when we take that basic idea of like, yes, this could be offensive, of using something sacred in a profane way and applying it to literally anything that just crosses racial lines. Like a hair braid's great. Somebody has dreadlocks and like they'll get accused. Like that's not a sacred thing. It's just a thing that like black people, and by the way, Vikings did, or
people who don't want to brush their hair,
or like if I'm white and I got into a mariachi band and they're like, that's cultural appropriation. No, because like so much fucking awesome culture is cultures mingling. Like really cool things happen when different ideas, like really cool fusion foods happen when you combine them. When you start taking this idea of like all races need to stay in their lane, that's fucked up. That's fucked up racist bullshit. identitarian essentialism that is the kind of bullshit the Nazis thought. That's the kind, like, I'm like,
Have you seen? I don't know who did it. As far as I know, it's probably like Steven Crowder or something like that. But the viral video of the kid who goes to like a college campus dressed in like a mariachi outfit and just asks them. All he does the entire video is ask people on the street, "What do you think of my outfit?"
Yeah.
And everybody on the college campus, mostly white women, are like, "This is disgusting. This is so." He's a white kid, and then he goes like to the barrio.
yeah. And they're like,
"What do you think?"
yeah!
And they're like, "Yeah."
Yeah, they're all doing shots with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I think that, like, yeah, that kind of weird fucking pseudo. I share your angst. I'm not. None of this is contrary to Jen. This is a what do you call it? A additional opinion. But like, yeah, like when it's that just like we've created this weird ad hoc religion that you're in violation of, and like if you're white, you can't like ever sing anything you hear in rap. Rap is not yours or whatever. I think
Yeah.
it's
Well,
stupid.
even with this example, like if someone who like this emailer, if you want to tell me how you use spirit animals and it's different, like that's great. But approaching it in, hey, we have this term, we use it differently than you, like here's some education. There is a way to approach us and be like, my culture has this too. Instead of, how dare you? Like,
I think he was being tongue.
yes, and which is fine. I understand that I'm not really picking, but this is something that does come up as a content
does.
creator on the internet where I get in trouble for things that it's just, I was asking you a funny question about what animal you felt like you were.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be.
This is why I remain ethnically ambiguous. Because no one really knows.
Me too.
Nobody knows enough. To
I don't
know
want people to
exactly
know.
whether or not I'm saying something super fucked up.
Same with me. No one knows what race I am, and I want to keep it that way.
You and I are just the whitest things. That's all people think.
We're
And that's the
we're a
thing.
fucking storm of mayonnaise.
You and I are not allowed to have culture, which is also kind of offensive to me because it's like, as white people, what is our culture?
Well, yeah, and if
I
you,
don't
if you were
know.
to say theoretically get really, really into white culture and white heritage, that would be
It's a whole
kind
different
of
thing.
disconcerting.
Yeah.
By the way, since you said the phrase Martin Luther King Jr. being used to sell burritos, all I've been trying to do is think of puns, and the best I could come up with.
That's why
was,
your eyes lit the
I've
fuck
got
up when I
sour
said that."
cream today. That's pretty much it. Wasn't good. On taxes, stolen money rights. I wonder how much a tax refund, how many tax refund checks are being stolen as a result of, has resulted in people electing to not withhold as much. All right, so how much tax refund check theft has resulted in people not wanting a refund
Is
check?
that really a
Is
problem?
in people like intersecting the check and cashing it, and their
There have been a lot of, there was a huge hack that could happen for identity theft, where it was fairly easy to get from the IRS old tax returns. And so people were using that as a way to get all your information to file your taxes, take your tax refund, and then the government would be like, sorry, you already got your tax refund. But I don't know if that's something that is broken into the mainstream. Refund shrinkage writes, the tax refund thing isn't that more people are working the gig economy or working like you guys. I've been working the same job since 2018 as a W-2 employee. I haven't filled out a new withholding form since I was first hired until this year. I've gone from getting $2,000-ish in refund to owing for the first time in my life. Last year, I paid $4. That was the most annoying check I've ever written. What the fuck is $4 going to do? But I had to do it. After that, I added an extra $10 withholding every paycheck. This year, I got a $250 refund.
I think you did a good job with the $4 thing. It means that you weren't giving the government an interest-free loan.
Yeah.
So I would go back.
Refund shrinkage 2, Shrink Harder writes, I'm a CPA, and it's my opinion that the diminishing of tax refunds are 100% related to the changes in the withholding tables. The IRS Form W-2 was changed due to the Trump tax cuts. People were accustomed to being able to mark 0 exemptions and get a tax refund for a couple $100 to $1,000 at tax time. With the new form and withholding calculations, this is no longer true. The new form requires you to do some calculations if your household has more than one source of income. Asking non-accountant adults to do math is like asking a dog to pick up its toys. They will look at you like you're speaking a foreign language and then go do whatever that they feel like. And his point is the result is that people are just getting less refund because they don't want to fill out the form the right way, and sometimes they're owing.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It
Makes
makes
sense to me.
Thank you for telling us.
It's the worst week of my year, tax time, doing all that stuff. I hate it.
You should
How
be
long
doing your
do
quarterly.
you do your own taxes? Or do you have an accountant?
I got a guy.
How long does it take you to do?
You didn't like the guy. Because my guy has actually gotten more annoying lately.
And is your guy not yelling at you for not doing your estimated taxes quarterly because you're spending?
Oh, he tells me to do them. But
Okay.
he's not my fucking dad.
I just out of curiosity,
My
how
fucking
long-
dad's gonna send you an email and be like,
Let him
"Send in
tell
your
him to do my
estimated
goddamn
payments."
taxes. I'll listen to him.
Oh, he actually did send me a message and he said no.
Good.
How long does it take you to put together like your exemptions and your other income streams and things? Like in terms of the time.
Day.
Me
A
too.
day.
Yeah, it takes
A
me
day.
about a day to get everything done just to send it off.
And thankfully, it actually went faster this time because a lot of times the forms to get Excel or get like a CSV form that I need to actually go through stuff is stupid and annoying, but searching for all the data is a lot easier. And so before I would just copy it and then it would paste awkwardly into Google Sheets or whatever. But now I used AI to reformat it into a little CSV thing, and it was great. So that was really helpful. At least it made it go faster.
AI Stan.
Look, it makes shit easier. Who am I? Medicaid industrial complex rights for taxpayers who receive a W-2. 7.65% of their income goes to the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Another 7.65% is paid by the employer. A term of art, bullshittery, known as payroll tax. 1099s and self-employed taxpayers pay the whole 15.3, so technically out of 55% of Social Security and Medicare comes from the income taxes. If a peacenik wanted to be unfairly disparaging of the bloated sclerotic leviathan known as the military-industrial complex.
Okay.
So if I'm reading that correct, about 55% of your taxes are going to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security?
If you wanted to, that less of a W-2 employee's
Yeah.
stuff is going to it.
That
then,
sounds right to me. When you look at the pie chart is mostly entitlements.
Yeah. Oh, we got a bunch of complaints about that. Stop calling them entitlements. They're not entitlements. They're
Yes, I know this happens
They're
every time. You know
things-
what?
yeah.
Hey, fuckers, you're entitled to a fair trial. You're entitled to a fair trial. That is the sense in which I use the term entitlements. Fuck off. I'm tired of having this goddamn fight. I'm not making a philosophical statement when I say entitlements that you're being a sponge. I'm just saying you're entitled to it by being a part of society. That's how I'm using the term.
Not benefits.
You could benefits fine. They're both interchangeable. I am a smart enough man to use synonyms regularly in my conversation, and I don't flip the fuck out whenever somebody else uses one.
My spirit animal's an entitlement. The most annoying man in the world writes, as somebody with a government job, lots of dependents and other write-offs, I want to thank you all for your contributions. If you're wondering where your taxes are going, a lot of it is going to people like me. I've consistently not had to pay taxes since I was 22, and I've received huge refunds.
Well, it sounds like someone who's not making much money if you never had to pay taxes. So
Do government employees not have to pay taxes?
he has to pay taxes unless he's making very little money and is.
Do they automatically deduct it? as a
Yeah, that's
government
what I'm
employee?
wondering. Is it just like if that's your only income stream, they're like, we got it covered. Don't
Yeah,
worry
we got
about it.
Don't worry about it, Doug.
Yeah.
And pay quarterly, morons, writes, make the quarterly payments. You're probably paying 10 to 20% more in interest and penalties because you aren't.
He's right.
You're not my dad.
You are now my accountant, listener. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I asked her dad to be my accountant. He said no.
But he is still willing to kill you.
Well, he's not allowed now.
You're taking back.
I'm revoking his kill privileges because he won't do my taxes.
Okay, he's gonna be very upset.
Good. New Heaton word writes, exacerbate.
Yeah, that's a good Heaton word. That's a good Heatonism. Somebody start putting it together. A
A
dictionary.
lot of people wrote in about exacerbate.
Yeah. Start. Somebody please start making make a word file and start keeping the Heatonisms in there. Eventually, we'll make a book.
And finally, Party Planner writes, I propose that we make jury run the Libertarian Party National Convention if he thinks it's so fucking easy.
I honestly think you could.
You
Would
high.
love to
I honestly
attend
think
LP
you could.
convention run by
Not.
jury.
I
I
think
would
you could.
never. I would rather try today, starting today, honestly, try to run either the Republican or the Democratic National Convention that includes the level of security that a president will need to receive because both of them
much
will
larger
have Secret
numbers.
Service, gigantic numbers, having to deal with a stadium. I would rather attempt to do that than deal with the ungovernable herding of cats that is trying to get the libertarians, because it's not only the logistics, it's not only booking a bunch of people that I can't imagine are exactly on top of everything or really want to get back to emails. It's also the fact that there is going to be an actual debate and an actual fight. Like, the Libertarian Convention is an actual convention in the way that we used to have conventions back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Where there's going to be a floor fight. It'll happen in wherever the Marriott or Hyatt that they're staying
Hilton.
in DC, the Hilton. It'll happen there, but there will be actual fights and screaming and yelling, and
It's not a
country.
coronation.
I'm so
It is an actual. They're actually making the decision then and there.
So I would like to get high and watch it. I would not like to organize it. I do not think it's fucking easy, for the record. I believe it is among the hardest jobs that anybody could ever have in politics, is trying to do your best to put on a convention for that party that in equal measures would burn the party down to the ground to prove their point right now. Like, that is a large amount of people that show up to these conventions. So no, I don't think it's easy. I think it's extraordinarily hard, but also good luck.
Fun
I
fact.
was just giving you faith in your logistics planning skills. I think it's funny that you went with, I don't want to deal with these particular people.
Yeah. Oh no, that part. I would rather organize the Democratic Party, which may well erupt in a riot this year. It's back in Chicago. Just tempting 1968. For whatever reason, there's a bunch of people in my timeline that are like really pushing back on the idea that this election is not 1968. And I don't know if they're taunting me because I'm going to do a podcast eventually comparing this election to 1968 because it's just the natural third season of Raise the Dead. But the only thing I want to say, but it's too dark to put in text, so I'll put it at the end of this podcast, is can we see if RFK makes it to July? Ooh. Because 1968, yeah. Because RFK got shot by a Palestinian activist and killed in 1968.
Really, it was a Palestinian.
Sirhan.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Sirhan
That's
Sirhan killed him.
his issue.
Yeah, killed him
And
for
RFK
Palestine.
is pretty damn pro-Israel.
Can we make sure that he makes it to Independence Day before we eliminate the comparisons?
The Biden administration won't give him security, which I still
Can
think is
we
insane.
make sure that he
Or
makes
ballot
it to
access.
July?
Yeah.
He's got a few of the ballots though. He's got Nevada. Although now some of the polling shows that he's drawing more from Trump than from Biden.
Not surprised by that at all.
No.
So now it's going to be really funny to watch Liz Smith and some of the other Democratic operatives immediately start. Hey, you want to know who's really smart and wise? RFK. You want to know who's ruining the country? Cornel West. Boo. Yes.
The amount of like weird I feel like the Democratic Party has gone into overdrive with RFK in the last month of, hey, you don't need to think about him. Here's why you can dismiss him immediately. Vaccines. Dismiss him. He's crazy. Don't think about him. Don't look at his stuff. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, okay, wow, all right.
Yeah, the more they do that, I think people are like, oh, he's running?
Like
What should
I
do
talked
now?
when I was flying out of I was flying somewhere and I met somebody that'd been at the RFK event that I went to when I here in Austin. I was just talking to her. I was like, oh, do you know him? She's like, yeah, I've known him 20, 30 years. And I was like, what's the vaccine thing? Like, what's that about? And she's like, he's really worried that this cheaper, I don't know the medical term. He's worried that this cheaper combining material is used in vaccines that has an aluminum byproduct, and he wants the vaccine companies to use the more expensive variant because he thinks that there's a less likely chance of medical side effects. And I'm like, well, that sounds not to me like vaccine denial. That sounds to me like more regulatory concerns about poor products causing health problems.
Did you ever listen to the episode
Rogan
with him
interview?
on Rogan? Yeah, you really should, because that's what he explains to me. It sounded so much more reasonable than the he hates vaccines.
Well,
like it just
again,
wasn't true.
the Democratic Party's not wanting to engage with him as a candidate. They're wanting to come up like they're in overdrive with, here's how you dismiss this man. Just dismiss him. And not us and not our listeners.
No.
Even the ones that fucking get worked up.
I wish you a happy Independence Day. On PX3 this week, we've got Bill Scher to talk about the long and winding road that foreign aid took in the House and Senate. And Tom Merritt is on Friday
Yay, Tom!
discussing all of the TikTok stuff. Jen.
So one of the things we didn't talk about that became law this weekend is the reauthorization of the FISA 702 program, which is the one that allows the government to tap foreigners without warrants, but then incidentally tap Americans. And then there's a big database of all that incidental information, and the government, FBI in particular, keeps going into it without warrants and looking up information on people. So they reauthorized that, made some changes, some good, some bad. And so I made an episode about it, and I should be done with it in the next day or two.
Nice. So
Yeah.
a FISA deep dive.
Yes, FISA deep dive, and then I'll get back to, because I was going to work on this Palestine episode, but now that there's so much more stuff that just became law, I'm going to add that to it and then be done with that topic for
You?
a while, hopefully.
Israel?
I mean, I don't enjoy talking about this. I don't enjoy watching my Patreon go down and getting the fucking message. I don't enjoy it, but it's necessary to know the changes in law, and there were some big ones. So one more episode about that, and then we will.
Then the situation will probably resolve.
Yeah, I
We
think
don't
we'll
talk
wrap
about it
up.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another mass grave. Bastards. Heaton. What's going on in the orphanage?
Thanks, Jen. We have something of a palate cleanser on the orphanage this week. Last week was one of those big monologue episodes. We talked about that at the top of the program. This week is a palate cleanser. When I was down at the border on the press junket with Justin Robert Young here 2 months back, I was grabbing various people just to get, like, I would love to talk to you. You're a farmer. And, like, was just getting them largely as not sound bites, but chunks within a broader episode. There was one guy that I was just looking to get a soundbite from, where we had sat down to lunch. I think, Justin, you were next to me, and I, as a joke, they were going to talk about SB1 and SB2 visas, like looked around at the people around me and went, so which one do we want to cheer for and which one do we want to boo? The joke being, why would anybody be that ramped up about that? And this very earnest man that looked just like Wilford Brimley at the end of the table leaned forward and went, well, actually, those two visas are beneficial both to the immigrants and their host countries. They're mutually beneficial. And I was like, this is adorable. You were very earnest. I would love to talk to you about this.
And
So
do you have diabetes?
So I sat down and talked to the Wilford Brimley impersonator. He's not really that. He's a lovely man and a really good chat. And I just wanted to talk to him about temporary skilled visas. And I immediately found out, like, within 45, I was like, how did you get into this? And he's like, well, you know, I was a ringleader at a circus for 30 years. And I was like, holy fuck, can we talk about circuses? So I derailed my own program for 30 consecutive minutes to ask him literal circus questions. We talk about elephants. We talk about where the elephants go in the winter. And then after 30 minutes of me just like, child in candy store going, well, what about trapeze artist? Straight up, just 30 minutes of Heaton Unchained talking to a former ringleader about circuses. We do eventually get to how they affect immigration, or rather how they're emblematic of the immigration process. And then it becomes a really good policy episode about how skilled visas work and the deficit we have of them in this country. So you will hear me talking to a retired circus ringleader about immigration this week on The Political Orphanage.
I lived with a trapeze artist.
Nice.
Jeff, the
Joe?
trapeze artist. No, but Joe really liked Jeff.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Jeff was very flexible.
Ay, ay, ay.
Oh, wait, we didn't do anything. No, fuck.
You weren't
It didn't
making-
sound like that.
You
did
weren't
it?
making coffee for Jeff?
No, we worked together for the AVP Pro Beach Volleyball Tour, so there were athletic things involved in our friendship. But yeah,
This sounds more and more
he
sexual
was
than
in
the
the
more she
circus.
talks.
Yeah.
No, he was in the circus in Florida. Came out to be an intern.
Oh, yeah, he was.
I hate you both. I quit. And Heaton, you're fired.
No! For Andrew Eaton and Jen Briney, I'm Justin Robert Young. We're not wrong.